Reddit, what is your oh crap, I might die story? Was an army paratrooper. Had a malfunction at around 75 feet. I was told that if you hear yourself hit the ground, you survived. As I was falling, I thought, dang, I hope I hear it when I hit. I did, but don't remember anything else. Woke up on the emergency room a few hours later. Severe concussion, shattered pelvis, broken femur, soft tissue destroyed in my lower back and hips as well. Still hurts to this day and it has been 6 years. Jokingly putting on a trash can, one of those thin ones with the flap at the top, to look like R2-D2 while in the pool, tilted forward and all the water rushed through the front flap as I torpedoed to the bottom of the pool, trapped wearing a trash can with my arms pinned down inside. Yes, alcohol was involved. TLDR. Almost drowned wearing trash can, so close to a Darwin Award. Hold my BLBLBLBLBBBLBLBLBLBB. One time I had a friend shoot an arrow through a bush from my 30 pounds bow. The plan was for me to dodge it. It came basically directly at my eye, and I froze. Thankfully, the flights caught on one of the leaves, and it swerved, just grazing my ear. Sometimes I wonder how I survived my childhood. When I was around 13, 3 AM on a Saturday, I woke up with a severe asthma attack and I had lost my rescue inhaler the day before. I tried to calm myself down for 10 minutes but I just couldn't handle the lack of oxygen. Imagine drowning but being able to breathe in oxygen for 1 second at a time while someone sits on your chest. So I woke my parents up and they immediately drove me to the ER. Now when I got to the ER, my breathing became a fraction better on its own, but still very difficult to breathe. My mom explained to the receptionist lady that I'm having an asthma attack and that I can't breathe. She made me wait in the waiting for nearly 4 hours. I had a crushing feeling in my chest, barely breathing and a huge headache from the lack of oxygen to my brain. After the first hour I became fed up and went to talk to the lady, and I also asked if I could use an inhaler to ease my breathing. She did not show any sign of sympathy and just told me to wait. 4 hours later, I go inside and the doctor gives me a mask which allows me to inhale antihistamines, which basically opens up my airways and gets rid of mucus buildup. This process took less than 10 minutes. TLDR. Had a severe asthma attack and was forced to wait in the ER for an excruciating 4 hours and then finally got treated with a less than 10 minutes procedure. I hate hospitals. Jesus Christ. Frick that nurse, man. I posted this somewhere else recently, but here goes again. Our old family holiday house is located near a train track. It's really pretty. Goes over a bridge by a river mouth between 2 hills. Anyway, the track passes through a tunnel as it leaves the bridge. When I was about 10, my sister and I were playing on the bridge when we heard the train coming. It always sounded its horn when it was approaching so that anyone on the pedestrian part of the bridge could get off, as being on the bridge when it passed was meant to be scary and unpleasant. So my sister and I started running, and as we run my sister yelled something like wonder what it would be like being stuck in the tunnel with the train, to which I replied I've done it. I lied. She was very surprised. She was a few years older, and I made up some story about how I had been stuck in it with my dad before or something, and casually said we can do it now if you want to, which he agreed. At this point the train was close, so we ran into the tunnel and stood with our backs to the wall, just as it approached. What I hadn't realized was that the train pretty much fills the entire space of the tunnel, and we had to suck in our bellies and turn our head to the side and press ourselves towards the tunnel wall as hard as we could, with the train moving honestly millimeters from our faces, noisy and massive and rattly and metallic. I really thought we were gonna die. The worst was when some loose pole type thing was hanging down the side of the train came swinging along and somehow we had to duck while not allowing any part of us to move outwards. We did it though, and after what felt like hours the train eventually passed. Oh, and it was a steam train, so we were pitch black and covered in soot afterwards, coughing our head off, but extremely happy to be alive. TLDR. Convinced my sister to stand in a tunnel with me as the train passed through it, almost got squashed. I was watching TV in the basement, eating some nibs, small pieces of red licorice, and one of them got lodged in my throat. I couldn't dislodge it, and headed towards the stairs, trying to get to my brother who was upstairs. I got halfway upstairs as black spots dotted my vision and collapsed, certain that I would die an ignoble death. Thankfully, my older brother was on his way downstairs to ask me something, saw me turning blue, and quickly picked me up and used the Heimlich maneuver to free my airway. I've since developed an aversion to those cursed things. Same exact thing happened to my brother. He ate a chocolate covered cherry and was running to our dad. My dad did the Heimlich and he was fine. We offer him chocolate covered cherries as a joke now. It's funny because he's fat. I was pretty young, maybe 7 years old. I was at the next door neighbor's house playing with a friend. I came across what I thought to be a pair of authentic toy handcuffs, which were lying around the house. I decided to put them on myself. Turned out the reason the handcuffs looked so authentic is because they were real. I started freaking out when I couldn't get them off. The homeowners couldn't find the keys. I still to this day have no idea why the homeowners had a pair of handcuffs lying around with no accompanying key. It was probably a sex thing. Eventually, my parents were called over to the house. After the cuffs were poked and prodded for what seemed like an eternity, the cops were called to see if they could come over and help. The cop showed up and began picking the lock. As a 7-year-old boy trapped in handcuffs with the police now involved, I thought I was facing a life or death situation. I looked over at mother and asked amid the panic and tears, am I going to die, considering it was the most terrifying situation I had been in up to that point. I just assumed death was around the corner. I used to be in the habit of picking up hitchhikers. A few years ago, I was living in Texas, making the drive from Tyler to Austin in August. As I approached a small town, I look in pity upon a 35-year-old woman braving the heat to make it back to town. Thumb outstretched toward the unassuming passerby. Being the upstanding citizen that I am, I offered to give her a lift. We introduce ourselves, making decent small talk about the weather and whatever the heck else. Her name is Patty, and she informs me that her house is only a few miles away. After a short time, she directs me to take the next right, into the woods. Now, I am beginning to get suspicious. At this point, I'm about 90% certain that she is up to something. She has a look in her eye and a tone in her voice that set off some serious red flags. Worst case scenario, she has a group of dudes waiting in the woods to murder me. I have one hand in my pocket holding my knife. Then, she starts touching my arm and delivers the absolute best pickup line I have ever heard. Patty, oh my, you have some hairy arms. Is it the same down there? Me, naively thinking she means my legs. Yeah, then, I understand. P, do you like BJ's? No mom. What about my hand? No. Patty, I don't like that either. How about sex? Do you like sex? No. Patty, I hate sex. Where is your house? Oh, we passed my house a long time ago. Honey, she requests that I drop her by this dirt road. I happily oblige, and she kindly offered her services one more time. I declined. TLDR. Thought a hitchhiker was going to murder me, but she was only a prostitute. So you didn't got murdered and you didn't murdered. The P. I was working at McDonald's and just finished my shift. I was outside with co-workers that were on break talking and this guy came up to me asking my name. Now I didn't speak English back then, so one of my co-worker translated what the guy said. So I told him my name and he said, I don't believe you, and pulls out a hunting knife. Right there I'm like, WTF is going on? He tells me, you look like the guy I'm looking for. So my co-workers said, no, it is really his name. You got the wrong guy. So I take my wallet out while he's still pointing his knife at me and give him an id. He looks at it, throw it back at me and go away. So I am there, sitting on a bench still wondering what just happened and thinking that I could have gotten stabbed because someone else pee off this guy. How many years did it take you to go from being nearly an adult, working at McDonald's, with no English, to being what looks like fully fluent? This is more a story of my friend thinking, oh crap, robot boogie nights might die. Just last year I was out drinking with some buddies until the wee hours of the morning. Everyone ends up passing out around 3, but one friend and I made the wise decision to head down to one of our favorite smoke spots, a certain tree in City Park. By the time we walk there it's nearing 4 AM and we promptly climb up this large tree, a bur oak I believe. I was wearing a pair of Sperry's, with little to no traction to begin with, and the moisture on the grass had rendered the grip of my shoes essentially worthless. So we're nice and drunk and now smoking in a tree maybe 8-10 feet off the ground. After 45 minutes or so we decide it's about time to head back and I grab a large branch and reach my foot out to the next lowest branch. I come to in a hospital bed with a nurse and my friend beside me. Needed a CAT scan and some other tests to ensure my spine wasn't totally fricked and my brain wasn't either. Luckily there was no serious damage done, just a mild concussion. Lying in the bed my friend filled in the blanks for me. As I extended downwards to step on the branch, my shoes betrayed me, slipped off the branch, hit my head on said branch, then fell the rest of the way to the ground. My buddy jumps down and claims I wasn't breathing, afraid of cooties, and with no CPR training whatsoever apart from movies and TV, attempts to resuscitate me using his semi-clenched fist as a straw so our lips don't have to touch. Apparently it worked, and he called a cab and took me to the air. We don't go to that tree anymore. I love the idea of I don't want you to think I'm gay when you start breathing again, so I'm going to give you incorrect CPR. Hope you live. When I was 9, my dad was driving down a highway and I was in the passenger seat. Bad idea I guess since I was 9, and the door was loose. It swung open and my little body flew out and I gripped onto the car seat headrest thing and my dad was driving with one hand and pulling me in with another. He told me he has never been that strong in his life. I'm the only child. The only remaining child. I work in an analytical chemistry lab. The hazardous waste drum in the lab wasn't grounded properly and when I touched it I discharged a static spark onto the funnel. The air conditioning in the lab was overworked because we had just installed our new mass spectrometers and they put out a little hot air from their cooling fans. With the ambient room temperature around 85 F, the methanol and acetonitrile in the barrel had turned into gas. The spark that came off of my hand ignited and the barrel exploded, covering me in hazardous waste and sending the barrel through the ceiling. Whoever neglected to ground the barrel properly also left the bung wrench on top of the barrel. It hit me in the forehead. I have a wicked scar and severed a nerve. It happened so fast I didn't have time to close my eyes and got hazardous waste in them as well as my mouth. I was wearing full PPE. It didn't help. I didn't go into shock until I realized I couldn't see out of my left eye because of the blood streaming down my face. So I had a few lucid minutes where I just was amazed that I was millimeters from death. If I had been standing over the drum instead of beside it, it would have obliterated my head. The nerve damage grew back and I got some length paid leave and a wicked scar. No superpowers yet though. Still waiting. Well, it's less of my experience because I was too young to remember this now, but when I was about 2 years old I was holding a plastic cup and I tripped over my aunt's foot. The cup went straight into my eye and knocked me unconscious and apparently I wasn't even breathing. An ambulance was swiftly called but when I woke up I was just fine. Haha. Gave my mother a bit of a shock. The cup went straight into my eye and knocked me unconscious. I can imagine ball going straight into cup, but not this. A few years back, I had an asthma attack without any inhalers so it lasted all night around 8 hours. It was freshly squeezed heck. Been there. It's god awful. The chest aches for days. Suicide attempt. Didn't really realize the magnitude of my stupidity until I lost consciousness. Luckily somehow woke up to a spout of foamy puke about half a day in. Spent too much time debating with myself as the pills ate through my liver and stomach and intestines. Lost consciousness again for a minute. And somehow came to again. Freaking out. Pure adrenaline response. No motor control really. Just sort of stumbled out my door and passed out again on my driveway. Was stupid. Life is good now. Never try it. You might not be lucky enough to have the time to think about life while you're slowly dying. Same with me. Really. Stupid enough to swallow a bottle of Tylenol and downed with a half flask of vodka. Woke up a few hours later in a puddle of my own vomit. Got checked out at the hospital. Most of the pills came back up. Crap sucked but I lived. 4 years later, crap still sucks, but I'm alive for now. When I was 4 or 5 years old I was riding a horse alongside a highway without a helmet. The horse proceeded to have a stroke while we were strolling along and fell on me. My tiny child self had a split second to be terrified and think that I wasn't going to wake up. I did, and then years later asked my mom why the sweet frick I wasn't wearing a helmet. I was in the ER because I had pneumonia. After figuring out what was wrong with me, they hooked me up to IVs and then left. I went into anaphylactic shock due to one of the antibiotics. Another time, I went to the ER expressly for anaphylactic shock, and after being given 3 doses of EP, steroids and enough Benadryl to knock out a horse, I still could barely breathe. I had a blood test that said I was not allergic to aspirin, but it turns out I have a pseudo allergy to aspirin and NSAIDs. Pseudo in that it's not technically an allergy, but consuming those things will still kill me. Sounds like you need to stop going to the ER. Bad stuff only seems to happen there. After about a year of constant UTIs and constant antibiotics, I developed Clostridium difficile and ended up being admitted to hospital. I was basically pooping pure blood. It was terrifying. People die from C. diff. You're not even supposed to be at risk of getting it if you're under 65 and have a healthy immune system. I was 25 at the time. Shows how much antibiotics can screw you over. Ironically, I then had to take more antibiotics to get rid of the infection. So it goes. Lucky you didn't need a poop transplant. I have Crohn's disease. For the uninitiated, it's a digestive disease where your own immune system attacks your digestive system, or perhaps attacks some harmless bacteria in your digestive system. It's chronic. It's treatable. So I'm used to being sick and I'm very used to stomach pain. As a female, I can tell you Crohn's feels. To me, everyone is different, like really bad period cramps. Like someone is just inside your gut squeezing and wringing your organs. Like a baby chest burster alien is about to explode out of your lower abdomen. That's everyday normal stomach feeling for me. So when I say that I felt the worst stomach pain of my life, maybe that'll mean something. I got this stabbing feeling in my back and my stomach started pulsing, and then I started shivering so violently that I couldn't stand up anymore. I ran a hot bath and waited for it to stop, but it just kept getting worse. I almost passed out because I had started subconsciously holding my breath, a reaction I have to pain. I decided to go to the ER once I started throwing up. I thought I had a bowel perforation or an obstruction, though I wasn't throwing up enough for an obstruction. I was sure something had torn inside me and that I would die before I could get to the hospital. My boyfriend drove me because even though I was sure I was dying, I didn't think it warranted an ambulance. It was a kidney stone. Turns out I also had a kidney infection, which is why I got the chills. It sucked extra because they couldn't remove the stone until the infection had cleared up. The removal process could have washed the infection into my bloodstream. I had to have a stint for 2 weeks. Made me feel like I had a UTI the whole time. That was pretty miserable. Crohn's is still worse. Came to say this. Had a kidney stone. No clue was it was at that time. In the middle of nowhere in India. Oh, the pain. Thought that's it. You're gonna die far away from home. In 2006 I went to Iraq for the first time. We'd spent a few weeks in Kuwait doing some last minute train up before heading north. So I was starting to get used to the whole Middle East thing. Hot, dusty, sweaty. I was ready for anything. We flew into Iraq in a C-130, which is about as much space in the back as a typical city bus. Per protocol or per the pilot's whim, we started doing parabolas and all kinds of crazy crap shortly after crossing into Iraq. That's when I started thinking, this crap just got real. No more than 10 minutes after landing at the airfield, we started taking effective incoming. Crap was literally going down. The closest bunkers were a good 200 meters or so from where the plane was, and the USAF crew chiefs were going dolphin nuts about everybody getting to the bunker. I was a young private, never been in anything like this before, so the Air Force dudes really got me scared. I ran like I'd never ran before and prayed like a mother in that little bunker. IDF attacks got a lot less exciting as time went on, but that first one puckered my beehole inside out. The last part is so true. They went from butt puckering to apathetic in about a week. By week 2 I would sleep through the alarms. As a rule I would need to hear at least 4 hit before thinking about the bunker. I was goofing off in the ocean on a beach trip a few years ago. Being overconfident in my swimming abilities, I swam out almost past the breakers. When I turned around to wave at my BF back on the shore, I realized I had been dragged out way further than I realized. I started to try to paddle back and instead felt myself being pulled still further out by the motion of the waves. or maybe a riptide, not entirely sure. Either way, in that moment when I tried to swim forward and ended up further away rather than closer, I felt my stomach drop because I was sure I was going to drown. Much panicking and frantic swimming ensued, and somehow I made it back to the beach and was swiftly berated for going out so far in the first place. I guess I deserved it, though, for being such a dummy about safety. LOL. Always swim parallel to the shore if you are ever caught in a current. For anyone that doesn't know. 7 friends and I were hiking near the back end of the Devil's Garden Trail at Arches National Park when a 100-year storm came in fast. We were about 1.2 miles from the parking lot. I immediately tried to rally my friends to start booking it back to the car. 2 decided to follow with me. The clouds were building behind us, so we were running from it and not into the storm. But the other 5, including my husband, decided it would be cool to storm watch. Every time I turned around, the others had fallen farther behind. The storm got ugly in a hurry. Flash floods washed away the cairns that marked the trail, lightning striking very close by. The 2 friends and I got off the top of the rock fins, which are iron rich and attract lightning, and waited for the rest of our group on the valley floor until it was no longer safe to do so. Everyone got out okay, without even minor injuries. Still amazes me, not knowing if my husband was okay was the worst feeling of my life. They had pulled off the trail to sit in an arch and watch the storm, not realizing the cloud had come over the lip of the rock face behind them, that they were now in the storm. Sun going down, raging winds full of sand, lightning all around them, and shin deep water on the trail. Idiots. By the time we made it back to our campsite, it was completely washed away. When I was 19, I had come down with a severe case of bronchitis. The doctor prescribed me some hydrocodone cough suppressant medication. Being a manly man, I don't need to measure my doses. I can eyeball it and I'll be a-okay. Wrong. Took a sensible swig before bed and woke up in the middle of the night, woozy as frick, and I felt my pulse throughout my entire body. I thought to myself, I probably overdosed. I might die, and went back to sleep. Definitely scary. They call that sipping on some sizzurp. Congrats, you're a rapper. I was an intern at a big name zoo. I was assigned to the giraffe house for my morning shift, where I would basically clean up all the giraffe crap and hose the stalls down. Well, we had to keep the male separate from the females because we couldn't have any more females. Now, as you can imagine, the male was pretty off. So while the females were out in the yard, the male was just inside being a pissant. One day I was cleaning the stall next to him, and as I was hosing the stall down, I completely forgot about the one rule. Don't get too close to his stall. As I was hosing, I just feel this huge gush of wind come flying on top of my head. The second I felt this, I flinched and started laughing, because if this male giraffe had any coordination, then I would have been dead. This happened twice. When I was 16, I would race my friends on residential streets at night. I passed him in the oncoming traffic lane. I probably got up to 65-70 miles per hour in a 30-mile-per-hour zone. I realized the turn to my neighborhood was coming up, and, being the novice driver I was, I swerved into the turn. My car started skidding and I ran into the curb. I barely missed a fire hydrant and then ran through a speed limit sign. Pretty ironic, huh? My headlight broke. My passenger door was stuck shut from the fender being pushed back, and then my wheel bent under my car. I told my mom and the officers that my hand slipped. I ended up getting my car fixed and then broke it in the same spot, trying to drift a month later. Man, was I stupid. Was working on some outdoor lighting and my dad forgot to tell me that the power was still on. Shocked myself with 240 volt through both arms, and all I could think was that electrolysis of the blood can take up to 5 minutes to kill you. This is the only problem with knowing approximately how long something will kill you, because you either just wanted to know about it or you know it because you study science and or medical subjects. Went to Miami for work. I drove home with the worst headache I've ever had, and I could barely open my eyes because light made the pain worse. Fast forward to the next day, I still have the headache. Went to the walk-in and was referred to does a spinal tap. Then a nurse comes back in wearing a mask and talking about white blood cell count being high. I'm then being jabbed with an IV in each arm and loaded on Percocets. Turns out I contracted meningitis during my work trip. I realized I may actually die when I was told every antibiotic known to man was being pumped through each IV because they didn't have time to wait for a culture to grow to see what type of bacteria was involved. It was also discomforting when nurses and doctors refused to come into my negative airflow room without layers of protection. The layers of protection were to protect you from them, not the other way around. You probably already knew that. Driving back from skiing in a snowstorm. The highway is packed with snow. We spin out, maybe 900 degrees or 1260 degrees, and wind up coming gently to rest against a snowbank. No damage, only to see another vehicle spinning straight at us. Flying in a tiny plane. Got caught between 3 T-storms. Lost airspeed and couldn't get out of it in time. Clouds were too thick to see anything and the pilot had spatial disorientation. 16,000 featuring later. The clouds start to break and the ground is very close. My last words would have been, shit. Pulled up about 500 feet from the ground. The plane was pretty banged up, but it got us home. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.